I like both answers to that. On the yes, the countries that are actually going to do well in a more disorderly world are all in part powerful because they are nation states. And if anything, I see their authority strengthening. And of the major ones, the only one that kind of has a heterogeneous makeup is the United States. And I don't think that's going to change. So our view of the nation state in the United States, I think, is solid. And for the Frances and the Turkeys and the Argentinas of the world, I think their nation state identity is also very solid. But the places that are going to break down, I totally agree. Because for demographic reasons, we're actually seeing the disintegration of a lot of ethnicities in real time. And if you break that, then you can't have the nation state without the nation. And that is going to force new economic models. Now, we don't get that in 10 years. We probably don't get that in 30 years, but we are definitely seeing the stage set for whatever is next. Sure, I would have said Japan because it was the only power that is both naval and has a zone of interest that overlap and potentially clash with the United States. But when Shinzo Abe,
years old.
Yeah, fair enough. But, giant fighting robots, this is Japan.
Okay.
But Shinzo Abe realized, like his predecessors, that from a demographic and an economic point of view, if the Japanese people were going to have economic growth and security, it had to be hand in glove with the United States. So he came to the United States, he cut a humiliating trade deal with Donald Trump, and then his successor told Biden that the trade deal stands, we don't want to renegotiate it. So Japan is the only country who has seen this coming and who has anticipated what needed to be done. And they found a way to make friends on both sides of the American political aisle. So Japan has chosen to not be a challenger, but to work alongside the United States. That is the only significant power that I see for the next 30 years that could theoretically challenge the United States, and they're now part of the family. Sure. So let me hit this from two angles. First of all, with the baby boomers retiring, we know that the volume of domestically available capital is going to crater. It's going to drop by at least half. You're the wealthiest and you have the most free capital in your system in the final decade before you retire. On average, the baby boomers retire at the end of this year. So we're there. There's nothing we can do about that. However, the greater the shock to any individual country, the more money becomes mobile and seeks a home in a place where there's rule of law and private property rights. And so we're already seeing absolutely mammoth volumes of capital moving out of Europe and the Chinese system and specific to the United States. So for example, BASF, the world's largest chemical company, they're in the process of basically dismantling everything in Germany and moving it to Louisiana because it's their only chance to stay in business. They hope that will allow them to export enough petrochem back to Germany to keep Germany alive, but that would require an industrial build out faster than what the Nazis did during World War II. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it off, but they're going to try. Toyota, build where you sell. Basically, we are seeing that mantra carried out by almost every European and Asian company because they realize you either move where there's markets or you die. We can do it better. We could, for example, amend the Jones Act to improve our own internal transport system. We could help the Mexicans with a better rail network. There are things that we can do to speed this up and integrate new players. But overall, we are looking at Europe is breaking down basically in terms of a major manufacturing power. And China, honestly, it's become a bit of a race. Well, let me give you two examples, one good, one bad. First, the bad. The baby boomers are not a purely American phenomenon. They exist in most of the advanced world for similar reasons. After World War II, soldiers came home, got on with the business of their lives, had a lot of kids, though they're German boomers and Korean boomers and so on. Yeah, okay. So we've always known that as the boomers retire globally, that they're taking their capital with them. At the same time, they're going to demand more capital from the system for healthcare and pensions. So this is a global tsunami, and it is going to be crushing. Now, in the United States, we've got the millennials to help pay for things. We have a replacement generation. So in relative terms, we know that the carry here is about a third less than what it is everywhere else. Second good news is that for the United States, the debt doesn't matter nearly as much. When you're the global currency, you can do things that no one else can do. One of the things we've seen specifically with the Ukraine war is that the Russians are realizing they're actually more dependent upon the US dollar now than they were before. which is hilarious because they went and they shoved $500 billion into yuan. And then when they tried to get it out, the Chinese were like, no, we don't want to buy that back. And they just lost $500 billion. There's no liquidity. So their option is dollars or euros in physical currency that they move in bricks or barter. So their efforts to move away from the American-dominated system has made them closer to the American-dominated system, and that's just a riot. Apply this now to every currency in the world. The euro and the yen, as part of the sanctions, basically signed up to be subordinate to the US dollar. So the US dollar is more powerful than it has ever been before. And if you consider that only the United States has millennials, and it's only the United States now that has demand moving forward, and so it can use normal monetary policy tools like raising interest rates. And there is nowhere but for the dollar to go but up for decades to come. And the less the US trades with the world, the more attractive the US dollar is as a method of exchange for everyone else, because you are less concerned that the US is going to manipulate it now. And that's just the world we're moving into. I mean, it took the world over a century and a half and 2 world wars to ditch the pound because it was so advantageous. And as few people out there that love the United States, we are far more popular in the world today than the Brits were during the 1850s to 1940s. Sure. So the Jones Act is a law that dates back to the 1920s that says that no cargo can be transported on any vessel between any 2 American ports unless the vessel is American built, owned, captained, and crewed. So you can loosen those 4 restrictions. You could say, 50%, for example. If you do something like that, you start getting a lot of foreign money, most notably Japanese money, into the American transport network. And for the cost of about $300 billion, which is 1 year of spending on our interstate highway system, you could basically replace every piece of physical infrastructure on the entire waterway network. And if we only tripled the flow of goods on the waterways, we would probably drop internal transport costs by half in the United States, and the waterway could probably support a 20-fold increase in traffic flows. So there's a lot of room here for improvement. But the simplest way to do it is to allow foreign companies to actually own some of the transport companies that are already in the United States and allow them to use their capital and technology and shipbuilding capacity in order to build out what we already have naturally. From my point of view, the biggest surprise is the fragility of the Russians. When you look at states that have survived as long as Russia has been around, you assume there's a certain durability. But here we have a country that keeps threatening and launching wars, that when someone pushed back, we discover that it's a paper tiger. Not harmless by any stretch of the imagination, but utterly incapable of learning the lessons of the Crimean campaign, much less the world wars. Russia has regressed in terms of military capacity over 150 years since the Cold War ended. And it makes you wonder who else out there is not nearly as strong as we think they are. And this is not a projection. I don't know, but it makes me really, really wonder just how fast China can collapse. Yeah, and I'm not immune to this. So I was probably one of the people in my field that was most bullish on Ukraine. And I thought this would be completely over with Ukraine completely broken and occupied within 6 months. And so all of us were laughably wrong. Well, we are still in the nation state system. The Ukrainians are proving that it's not dead yet.